Hello, my name is Bob Stone, and I've been asked to spend just a few minutes talking about the ministry that God's blessed me with as a chaplain in the United States Air Force. I had a chance to go to Gordon-Conwell for a grand total of 12 years, both part-time and full-time. I had a chance to finish an MAR degree in 2000, a Master of Divinity degree in 2009, and then I had a chance to complete a Doctor of Ministry degree in military chaplaincy in 2020. Currently, I serve as a chaplain in the Texas Air National Guard, where I hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. I serve on the headquarters staff of a unit that gives guidance and direction for what we call 8 squadrons that are stretched between the state of Louisiana and the state of Hawaii. My story began back in 1996, where I first entered Gordon-Conwell straight out of my undergraduate degree. Now, I'd become a Christian during my senior year of high school and had joined a college ministry, but for a variety of reasons, I'd kind of fallen through the cracks and had never had a chance to be discipled. And so I felt God calling me to ministry. I felt God calling me to seminary, but I had a lot of maturing to do before I was ready for what God ultimately had planned for me. While I was at Gordon-Conwell as a young man, I had a wonderful experience being discipled by a man who became a professor, Dr. Jim Critchlow. I finished an MAR degree, and I'd felt that God had brought me there primarily just to grow in my faith. But I graduated and pursued my second passion, which is in aviation. I went down to a school that specializes in training pilots, and I joined a wonderful church that had a thriving young adult ministry. While I was there, I had an opportunity to start doing pulpit supply preaching in the local area and kind of get my feet wet doing ministry things. I became a civilian airline pilot, and then the terrorist attacks of 9/11 happened. After the terrorist attacks, I was laid off from my job, and eventually God led me to use my seminary degree as the assistant for the chaplain for the Boston Red Sox and the New England Patriots. After doing that for a while, I was recalled back to be an airline pilot, but it laid a seed of how can I combine my love of aviation and being a pilot with being a pastor. And that led me down the road of the Air Force chaplaincy and led me ultimately to where I am today. I've heard it said that being a military chaplain is most similar to being a missionary on the mission field. The military has its own language, its own culture, its own social norms, and a lot of being an effective military chaplain is learning how to thrive in that culture. I've had about 1,000 different adventures, from serving with the US Space Force in a remote Space Force base in Alaska, to being in the back of a C-130 transport plane with night vision goggles on as they lower the back in flight and throw out the containers of supplies. I've had the opportunity to preach in chapels from the U.S. Air Force Academy to Air Force bases to deployed environments in all different types of areas. By God's grace, He has allowed me to minister to hundreds of people over the past 17 years, and I've been very grateful that I know that He has used me to save at least 2 lives. It has been the greatest joy of my life, with the exception of my family, and it has also been the hardest thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I ever did professionally was join what's called a casualty notification team, where I put on a dress uniform, went to the front door of a house I'd never been to before, and had to tell an 8-year-old little boy that his daddy was never coming home. I presided over the funerals of heroes. I've also celebrated in the birth of children, in weddings, and numerous different types of military ceremonies. It has truly been an honor and a privilege, and very often a joy. The biggest influence that Gordon-Conwell has had in my life and my ministry is that God has used Gordon-Conwell to prepare me for each additional season in my road to ministry. As I shared earlier, I came to Gordon-Conwell not very mature in my faith. I often share this story that at Gordon-Conwell, I had to learn how to read the Bible to 95% fluency in ancient Greek, but I'd never read it through in English. I was writing very complex exegesis papers, but I didn't know how to have a quiet time. I hadn't grown up in the faith, and no one had taught me how to do those things. But it was at Gordon-Conwell as a young person where God took that young man, and by the time I graduated with that MAR degree, I was almost unrecognizable as a young man of God. As God later matured me and developed me and called me to serve as an Air Force chaplain, He led me back to complete an MDiv degree, where I was able to do the rigorous academic studies, to serve on the staff of different churches in an internship capacity, to do what's called the chaplain candidate program, where I had an opportunity to become an officer in the Air Force and to serve internships on active duty Air Force bases. It was a tremendous formative molding experience in my life. And then as God had led me down the road of serving as an Air Force chaplain, it was time to become not just a chaplain, but a servant leader of other chaplains. And God led me back to complete a Doctor of Ministry degree focused on military ministry at Gordon-Conwell. That was probably the greatest academic experience of my life, studying under great teachers like Dr. Jim Critchlow and Dr. Blues Baker, and studying inside an actual wall of the city of Jerusalem, seeing historical sites, but more so being in a culture and in a cohort with other like-minded individuals called to serve as military chaplains in this very exciting but also very challenging ministry environment. I could not possibly overstate the impact that Gordon-Conwell has had in my formation, in my preparation, and the blessing it has been to me as God has chosen by His own grace to use me to be His arms and feet in the world of the military ministry. I'm so grateful for Gordon-Conwell. I'm so grateful for having an opportunity to share this all with you. God bless you, and thank you for listening.